There's something that happens to people who have wanted something for a long time. They work toward it. They think about it. They make plans around it. And then somehow they don't get there. And when you ask them why, they'll give you a reason. Not enough time. Not the right moment. Not quite ready yet. And the reason sounds true. It feels true. But in a lot of cases, it isn't the whole truth. Because underneath the story of not being ready, not having enough, not finding the right moment, there is often something quieter and more uncomfortable going on. A part of them doesn't want to arrive. Not consciously. Not in any way they would admit or even recognize. But a part of them has decided, without announcing it, that staying where they are is safer than getting where they want to go. And that decision runs quietly in the background, shaping everything, while the conscious mind keeps making plans and calling the result being stuck. There are two completely different experiences that produce the same feeling of not moving. And the reason this matters is that they require completely different responses. Treating one like the other doesn't just fail to help, it keeps you looking in the wrong place indefinitely. The first experience is genuine stuckness. There is something actually missing. A skill you don't yet have, a resource you don't yet have access to, a circumstance that hasn't yet opened. You're working against a real resistance, and the resistance is real. That's a legitimate condition, and it has a straightforward solution. Get what's missing, and you move. The second experience looks identical from the inside, but comes from somewhere completely different. Everything you said you needed is available. The path is open, and you still aren't moving. You get close, and something pulls you back. You build momentum, and then quietly lose it. You find reasons to wait that always sound reasonable, and always arrive exactly when forward movement was becoming possible. From the inside, this feels exactly like the first thing. It produces the same frustration, the same narrative of being held back, the same genuine sense that something is preventing progress, but nothing outside you is preventing anything. The resistance is internal, and it is, in its own way, deliberate, even though no conscious part of you chose it. To understand why this happens, it helps to understand something about how the brain actually works. The brain has one primary directive that overrides everything else: keep you alive. And to do that, it has developed an extraordinarily sensitive threat detection system, one that was shaped over hundreds of thousands of years of evolution, during a time when most threats were physical and immediate. That system hasn't fully caught up with modern life. It still runs on very old logic. And one of the things that old logic does is flag anything unfamiliar as potentially dangerous. Not bad, not wrong, just unknown, and therefore worth treating with caution. Success, for most people, is unfamiliar territory. The bigger life you're reaching for is, by definition, a life you have never lived. Your nervous system has no data on it. It cannot verify that you'll be safe there. And so, operating on the logic it was built with, it registers the movement toward that unfamiliar place as a threat, and begins, quietly and automatically, to pull you back toward what it knows. This is not weakness. It is not a character flaw. It is your brain doing precisely what it was designed to do. The problem is simply that the design was never updated to account for the fact that sometimes the most dangerous thing you can do is stay exactly where you are. Psychologist Hendricks spent decades working with high-performing individuals and noticed something that kept appearing across all of them, regardless of their field or their level of success. He called it the upper limit problem. The idea is this: each of us carries an internal thermostat, a set point for how much success, happiness, love, and abundance we unconsciously believe we are allowed to have. When life exceeds that set point, when things go better than our internal programming expects, something kicks in to bring it back down. Not externally, from the inside. You pick a fight with someone you love right when things are going well. You get sick the week of the opportunity. You make a decision that seems reasonable in the moment, and only later realize it cost you exactly the progress you'd been building. These are not coincidences. They are the upper limit in action. The internal thermostat restoring what it considers the correct temperature. The set point itself was established early. It was built from messages absorbed in childhood about what people like you achieve, what your family expects, what is realistic, what you deserve. It sits below conscious awareness, which is exactly why it's so effective. You don't feel yourself hitting it. You just notice that things keep not quite working out right when they were about to. The first act of changing this is simply recognizing that the thermostat exists, that there is a ceiling, and that it is not a feature of the world. It is a feature of what you were taught to believe about yourself. Why winning feels dangerous. The part of you applying the brakes is not malfunctioning. It's doing exactly what it was built to do. It is protecting you from something it has assessed as a threat. And what it has assessed as a threat is the thing you consciously want most. This is the part that sounds absurd until you look at it closely. So look at it closely. Right now, wherever you are, your potential is intact. Untested. Theoretically unlimited. You haven't won yet, which means you haven't been measured yet. You could still be extraordinary. You just haven't had the circumstances to prove it. And that unproven state is more comfortable than it sounds, because it means you can't yet be found wanting. The ceiling hasn't been located. The result hasn't come in. Winning ends that. The moment you actually succeed at the thing you've been reaching for, your potential stops being open and becomes specific. It has a size now, a measured, real, documented size. And the question that has been safely theoretical, am I actually capable of the life I imagine for myself, suddenly has an answer. And what if the answer is smaller than the question? What if you get there and discover you're still yourself? Same doubts, same fears, same quiet sense that something is missing, except now the last explanation is gone, because you got the thing and it didn't fix what you thought it would fix. That is the actual fear, not of failing, of succeeding and finding out that the destination was never the real problem. As long as you don't arrive, you don't have to find out. The dream stays intact. The potential stays open. And the part of you that's afraid of the answer keeps you safely away from the question. There is another layer that almost never gets talked about, and it may be the deepest one. Winning doesn't just change your circumstances, it requires you to change your identity. And the brain resists identity change with the same intensity that it resists physical threat, because to the nervous system, they register as the same kind of danger. You have a story about who you are. It was built over years, assembled from experience and feedback, and the conclusions you drew from both. And that story, however limiting parts of it might be, is familiar. It is the known version of you. And the brain is deeply, structurally committed to maintaining consistency with the known version, a phenomenon psychologists call self-concept threat. When you start to succeed in ways that contradict your story, when you start becoming someone your story didn't account for, a kind of internal alarm goes off. Not because the new version is bad, but because it's different. And different, to the part of the brain managing identity, registers as a loss of self. This is why people who win the lottery so often return to their previous financial state within a few years. Not because they're irresponsible, because their identity was built around a particular relationship with money, and the win put them in direct contradiction with that identity, and the identity pulled them back. It is also why lasting change requires more than new behavior. It requires a genuine update to the story, a new answer to the question, who am I? That makes the new behavior consistent rather than threatening. Without that update, every success feels like an imposture, like you're playing a character rather than being yourself. And eventually, most people find their way back to the character they know. And this connects directly to something else, the fear that winning will expose you. Not just that you'll be measured and found smaller than you hoped, but that success will invite a level of scrutiny that reveals something specific, that you were never really qualified, that you got there through luck or through convincing people of something that isn't quite true. That the win itself is evidence of a fraud that's about to be discovered. This experience is so common, it has a clinical name, impostor syndrome, and research consistently shows it affects high achievers at disproportionate rates, which is itself telling. The people most likely to feel like frauds are often the people with the most genuine capability, because genuine capability tends to come with enough self-awareness to see one's own limitations clearly. But the fear of exposure goes beyond imposter syndrome. For many people, it is rooted in something older, in early experiences of being punished, envied, or unsupported specifically for doing well. A child who learned that standing out invited criticism. A child who was told, directly or indirectly, that success was presumptuous, that it meant getting above yourself, forgetting where you came from, thinking you were better than others. That child learned to associate winning with danger, with loss of love, loss of belonging, loss of safety. And that association didn't disappear when the child grew up. It went underground. And it surfaces now as a vague but persistent sense that success is something to be careful around, that too much of it is somehow unsafe. The fear of winning doesn't present itself as fear. It presents itself as everything except fear. It presents itself as losing interest right at the threshold, not at the beginning when things are hard and uncertain, at the end when they're close and possible. That timing is the tell. A genuine loss of interest doesn't wait until the goal is within reach to appear. It presents itself as new priorities, a different idea, a competing project, something urgent that requires attention now. These things always seem reasonable, even inspired, but they arrive with suspicious consistency. Always when the original goal was becoming real, always providing just enough reason to step back. It presents itself as sudden doubt about whether the goal was ever right. This is the most convincing disguise because it sounds like self-awareness. Maybe I've changed. Maybe this isn't actually what I want. And maybe that's true. But if that question arrives specifically at the moment when continuing would mean winning, after years of pursuing something, it deserves to be looked at carefully rather than immediately trusted. And it presents itself as the word stuck, which is the most effective disguise of all, because stuck is passive. Stuck is something that happens to you. Stuck asks nothing of you except to wait for circumstances to change. It locates the problem outside yourself and leaves you as a reasonable person dealing with an unreasonable situation. Which is exactly why the part of you that doesn't want to win loves that word so much. Not every experience of not moving is this. Real obstacles exist. Real circumstances block real progress. I'm not suggesting that all limitation is self-imposed. That would be its own distortion. Here's how to tell them apart. Real obstacles respond to resources. When a genuinely stuck person gets what they were missing, the knowledge, the money, the opening, they move. The fear of winning doesn't respond to resources. Give it exactly what it said it needed, and it produces a new reason to wait. Because the resource was never the issue. The issue was never on the outside. Real obstacles appear where the actual difficulty is. They don't have a preferred location in the process. The fear of winning has a very specific location, the threshold. The closer success becomes, the stronger the resistance gets. If the pattern in your life is that things go reasonably well until you're almost there and then fall apart at the edge, that is not bad luck. That is a consistent signature, and it's pointing at something worth looking at honestly. The first thing is to name it accurately. Not stuck, afraid of what winning will bring. That distinction matters because you cannot address a fear you've successfully hidden from yourself inside a more comfortable word. The moment you say, even just privately, a part of me is afraid of what happens if I succeed, something shifts. Not because naming it solves it, but because you've stopped looking in the wrong place. The second thing is to look at the identity story you're carrying. What does it say about who you are and what people like you achieve? Where did that story come from? And is it actually yours? Because the upper limit, the self-concept threat, the fear of exposure, All of them are downstream of a story. And a story, unlike a circumstance, can be rewritten. But only once you can see that it is a story, and not simply reality. The third thing is to get precise about what winning might cost. Not in general terms, specifically. Is it the fear of being measured and found smaller than you'd hoped? The fear of visibility and the scrutiny it brings? The fear of becoming someone your current identity doesn't recognize? Name it specifically. Vague fear is very hard to work with. A named, specific fear is something you can actually sit with and decide about. And the fourth thing, the one that actually releases the brake, is to face the cost honestly and make a conscious decision about it. Because some of what the fear is protecting you from is real. Some comfort will be lost. Some version of your current identity will have to be left behind. Some exposure is inevitable. Pretending otherwise doesn't help. What helps is looking at the real cost clearly, grieving what genuinely needs to be grieved, and then deciding, as a conscious adult rather than a person being run by an old protective pattern, whether the win is worth it. That conscious decision does something the unconscious part cannot argue with. It makes the protection unnecessary. And when the protection is no longer necessary, the brake releases on its own. Practice. Sit or lie down comfortably. Close your eyes. Take a few slow breaths and let the body settle. Bring to mind something you've been reaching toward for a long time. Something that keeps not quite happening. Don't analyze it yet. Just let it be present. Now go underneath the surface of it. If this actually happened, if you actually got there, what would that require you to become? What version of yourself would have to emerge? And what version of yourself would have to be left behind? Notice any resistance that comes with those questions. That resistance is not an obstacle. It is information. It is the part of you that has been running the protection. And it is showing you exactly what it has been protecting you from. Now sit with this. The cost is real. The win is also real. And you are grown enough now to choose between them with open eyes. You don't need to answer immediately, but stay with it longer than is comfortable, because somewhere in that discomfort is the decision that changes everything. You may not be stuck. What you've been calling stuck may not be a condition imposed on you from outside at all. It may be a decision made quietly, protectively, without your conscious input, by a nervous system doing its best to keep you safe from unfamiliar territory, by an internal thermostat restoring what it considers the correct temperature, by an identity holding its shape against the pressure of becoming something new, by a very old fear that winning means exposure, and that exposure means danger. None of that was wrong to try to protect you. It was all working with the best information it had at the time. But the information is old, and you are not the person it was written for. Look at the cost clearly, grieve what's real, update the story, and decide, with full awareness, that the win is worth it. That decision is the only thing that was ever actually needed, and it was always yours to make. I'll see you next Monday.